In 1299, a Mongol army stormed into northern India expecting another easy victory. Because let's be real, the Mongols never stopped for anyone. Walls weren't high enough, armies weren't strong enough, and entire kingdoms just crumbled before them like paper in the wind. But here's the thing nobody talks about. Delhi broke that pattern. What happened at a place called Kili, just outside India's capital, wasn't just a battle. It was the moment that changed everything. And today, we're diving deep into why the unstoppable Mongol war machine met its match in India. Because this story is absolutely wild. For over a century, from 1221 all the way to 1327, the Mongol threat to the Indian subcontinent wasn't some distant rumor or occasional inconvenience. This was a constant, grinding reality that kept every ruler in Delhi up at night. Defending the northwestern frontier wasn't just important. It was the most urgent responsibility any sultan could have. Contemporary chroniclers didn't mince words about it either. In their view, if you couldn't hold the northwest, you had no legitimate right to rule at all. And after the Mongol Empire started fragmenting, that threat didn't disappear. It actually became more focused. The Chagatai Khanate, one of the successor states, kept the pressure on India relentlessly. But here's where things get interesting. Before 1299, most Mongol attacks on India were large-scale raids. You know the pattern. Fast cavalry sweeps in, loots everything in sight, and withdraws before anyone can organize a proper response. Brutal, yes, but not permanent. The year 1299 marked a turning point though, because this wasn't just another raid. This was something completely different. Dua Khan, the ruler of the Chagatai Khanate, sent his own son Kutluk Khwaja with an army that chroniclers claimed numbered 200,000 warriors. Now, modern historians think the real number was probably closer to 100,000. But even that is absolutely massive by medieval standards. To put this in perspective, most European kingdoms at the time could barely field 20,000 troops. This was an invasion force built for conquest. And if you needed any more proof that the Mongols meant business this time, just look at who came with them. Women and children accompanied the army, which was extremely unusual for a raiding party. This wasn't a quick smash and grab operation. This was a signal that the Mongols planned to settle and occupy Indian territory. Even more telling, they deliberately avoided looting towns and villages along their route to Delhi. Think about that strategic calculation for a second. You don't destroy property you're planning to own. They bypassed heavily fortified frontier posts like Dipalpur and Samana entirely, using speed as their weapon, and drove straight toward a place called Kili, right outside the capital. Panic spread through Delhi like wildfire. Markets were rushed. People fled to mosques seeking refuge, and prices spiked as fear took hold. So this brings us to Alauddin Khalji, the Sultan of Delhi, who was facing the crisis of his lifetime. The Mongols weren't some distant problem anymore. They were literally at his gates. The psychological shock alone threatened to destabilize his entire sultanate. But here's the thing. Hiding behind walls wasn't a solution. A prolonged siege would cause economic devastation, shatter confidence in his rule, and potentially trigger rebellions from ambitious nobles smelling weakness. In medieval politics, perception was reality. A sultan who looked cornered was a sultan who lost his throne. So Alauddin made an incredibly high-risk decision. He marched his army out to confront the Mongols directly at Kili. He was gambling that his discipline and organization could overcome a numerically superior Mongol force. And honestly, that took serious guts. But wait, because this is where the story gets even more fascinating. How did Alauddin even have an army ready to field at a moment's notice? Most medieval rulers relied on temporary levies they'd scramble to pull together during emergencies. Aladdin's secret weapon was actually years in the making, and it all came down to economics. The core challenge he faced was maintaining a huge permanent standing army without going bankrupt. His radical solution was tight state control over the economy through aggressive market regulation. He fixed prices on food, grain, horses, and other necessities, keeping them below pre-Khalji levels. He monitored merchants ruthlessly, punished hoarding, and crushed smuggling operations with an iron fist. It was harsh, no question, but it was effective. A cavalryman in his army earned about 234 tankas per year, which was actually a pretty low salary. But because prices were artificially suppressed, their purchasing power remained solid. The army stayed loyal, fed, and ready. Basically, the entire civilian society was paying an indirect tax to fund the defense machine, with resources being redirected into military preparedness. Money alone wasn't enough though, because corruption could hollow out even a well-funded army. Alauddin needed to professionalize his military forces, so he implemented two revolutionary systems. The first was called the DAG system, which involved literally branding horses with marks. This prevented commanders from claiming payment for weak, rented, or completely imaginary mounts. The second was the Hulia system, which created detailed physical descriptions of every soldier, essentially preventing ghost troops and salary skimming schemes. These might sound like boring bureaucratic measures, but they had critical battlefield consequences. When the Mongols arrived at Kili, Alauddin knew exactly how many real men and real horses he had at his disposal. He'd also reinforced old forts and built new defensive positions all along the northwestern frontier, placing experienced commanders at strategic points. These forts slowed Mongol advances, gathered intelligence, and bought precious time. And time only mattered because the central army could respond quickly. When the Mongols advanced in 1299, Alauddin was actually campaigning down in Gujarat, hundreds of miles away. Most medieval states would have frozen in panic, but Delhi didn't. He rapidly assembled somewhere between 30,000 and 70,000 troops and marched them to Kili. This wasn't a system built to stop just one invasion. This was a war machine designed to handle repeated invasions without running out of time or resources. So let's talk about the actual battle, because this is where things get absolutely intense. In late 1299, right outside Delhi, Alauddin personally commanded his forces, which was a powerful signal of how serious things were. His formation was specifically designed to resist Mongol mobility and prevent encirclement tactics. He organized his army into 5 divisions. Nusrat Khan commanded the left wing. Zafar Khan took the right wing with Hindu warriors integrated into his forces. Alauddin himself anchored the center. Aukat Khan led the vanguard, and Jula Khan held the reserve. The core principle was simple but crucial: stay together. The Mongols had won countless victories by exploiting moments when enemy formations stretched thin, broke apart, or chased after feigned retreats. The Delhi formation was designed to deny them that opening. But here's what really gave Delhi an edge: war elephants and heavy cavalry, a combination the Mongols rarely encountered. Alauddin deployed around 700 war elephants. These massive armored animals that functioned as living walls. They were positioned in front of and between divisions, serving as anchors for the formation. For Mongol light cavalry, elephants were an absolute nightmare. You couldn't easily ride around elephant lines. Arrows were largely ineffective against their armor, and horses naturally panicked around them. This forced the Mongols to either keep their distance or fight head-on, which played right into Delhi's strengths. On top of that, Delhi's armored shock cavalry were built for direct collision. They wore heavy armor, fought in disciplined formations, and delivered focused, crushing impact rather than loose pursuit. In close combat situations, elephants plus armored cavalry outweighed speed and mobility every single time. The opening phase of the battle centered on a general named Zafar Khan. And this is where the drama really kicks in. Zafar Khan had a personal score to settle after an earlier defeat at the Jhelum River, so he launched a ferocious charge against the Mongol left wing, which was commanded by a leader named Hylak. Initially, he succeeded. The Mongol left collapsed under the pressure. But here's the twist. It was a trap. The Mongols executed a classic feigned retreat, and Zafar Khan pursued too far, becoming isolated from the main Delhi formation. A Mongol commander named Taragai struck with a 10,000-man ambush force. Zafar Khan was surrounded, and according to the chronicles, he was even offered a chance to surrender and take a place of honor among the Mongols. He refused and fought until he was killed. Now this is where things get controversial, because a chronicler named Ziauddin Barani later accused Alauddin and his brother Ulugh Khan of deliberately refusing to send reinforcements to save Zafar Khan. Barani claimed it was jealousy, that they saw Zafar Khan as a potential political rival and basically let him die rather than risk elevating him further. But modern historians have a different take. They argue that the strategic restraint might have been completely intentional for military reasons, not personal ones. Committing the reserves to rescue Zafar Khan could have exposed the entire army to Mongol encirclement, which was literally their specialty. By holding back, Alauddin preserved the core force defending Delhi. It was a cold calculation, sure, but possibly the right one. And tellingly, after the battle, Zafar Khan was quietly erased from official chronicles. The message was clear. Obedience and centralized command mattered more than individual heroics. Winning as a system trumped dying gloriously alone. But here's the thing. Despite his death, Zafar Khan's charge actually had a major strategic impact. It inflicted heavy casualties on the Mongols and forced them to commit their reserves far earlier than they'd planned. Their formations were exposed, their rhythm was broken, and their clean battle plan unraveled. More importantly, it sent a signal. For the first time in generations, an Indian army didn't break, didn't panic, and didn't show fear when facing the Mongols. It was proof of a new kind of confidence in Delhi's forces. After Zafar Khan was killed, something strange happened. The battle entered this weird pause that lasted for days, with no major Mongol assault and no exploitation of their success. For an army famous for maintaining momentum and pressure, this was highly unusual. The first major explanation is that Kutluk Khwaja, the Mongol prince commanding the entire invasion, was severely wounded during the fighting and died shortly after. Losing their commander was devastating because Mongol armies relied on clear authority at the top. Without Kutluk Khwaja, orders slowed, decisions stalled, and momentum evaporated. They simply didn't have the confidence to launch a final assault against an intact Delhi defense. But the leadership crisis alone doesn't fully explain what happened next. 3 different pressures hit the Mongols simultaneously. First, their leadership was gone, and they had no clear direction. Second, they'd suffered tactical shock from facing disciplined armored cavalry, war elephants, and a formation that absorbed their best attacks and held firm. Third, and perhaps most critically, they hit a logistics crisis. Mongol armies lived off mobility, speed, and constant movement. Sitting outside Delhi for days pushed them past their operational ceiling. Horses needed fodder, men needed food, and supplies were running dangerously low. This is where Alauddin's quiet brilliance really shines through. He didn't need to defeat the Mongols outright in some glorious final battle. He just needed to not lose. By holding his formation and refusing to take the bait after Zafar Khan's death, he turned time itself into a weapon. Every extra day weakened the Mongol position. By the third night, they faced the risk of starvation, disorder, and a potential Delhi counterattack. So they did the unthinkable. They withdrew. The victory at Kili was huge, but it was also a warning. The Mongols had penetrated all the way to Delhi's outskirts, and Alauddin knew he couldn't rely on winning open field battles forever. Between 1303 and 1304, he constructed Siri Fort, an entire military garrison city that served as a permanent forward base against future Mongol attacks. It had walls, troops, supply depots, and command infrastructure all in one place. There's even this legend about the name Siri that comes from a 16th century historian named Farishta, who claimed it came from the word Sir, meaning head, because 8,000 Mongol heads were supposedly buried in the foundations and walls. Whether that's literally true or not, the psychological message was crystal clear. Delhi's entire posture had changed to something deliberate and ruthless. The Mongols kept coming in 1303, 1305, and 1306, but Delhi was ready every single time. Alauddin's economic and military reforms meant he could sustain a large standing army indefinitely, something most medieval states simply couldn't afford. The climax came in 1306 at the Ravi River, where a general named Malik Kafur commanded Delhi forces to a devastating victory. An estimated 60,000 Mongol troops were killed in what can only be described as annihilation on a scale the Mongols usually inflicted, not received. After that, large-scale Mongol invasions stopped during Alauddin's reign. Their aura of invincibility, which had held from China to Eastern Europe, was gone in the Indian context. And then Delhi went on offense. After Dua Khan's death, Alauddin shifted strategies entirely. Governors like Malik Tughlaq launched regular raids into Mongol-held Afghanistan, flipping the power dynamic completely. The Sultanate entered a near-total war state, with society militarized and discipline hardened to an extreme degree. It included brutal reprisals and punishments that extended even to the families of Mongol soldiers. It wasn't pretty, but it was devastatingly effective. So why was Delhi never conquered by the Mongols when so much of Eurasia fell? Because Alauddin Khalji turned his capital into a fortress, his economy into a war machine, and his army into an adaptive system that could absorb punishment and strike back with even greater force. When empires across the known world crumbled, Delhi stood firm, and that's a legacy that deserves way more attention than it gets.